What's up, everybody? Tuesday episode of GoJo and Golic about to come your way. 2 hours of goodness, and here's what's on the menu for today. Now open, the Cowboys job, apparently, after much speculation, will be open. Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys parting ways. We're going to break down the whole thing, including why the Cowboys job might not be so desirable. Plus, Tiger teeing it up in TGL. Marty Smith going to join the program to talk about the Tomorrow Golf League, and we'll do a little playoff postmortem. All right, what's going on with the teams that are heading home? Okay, we're going to break all this down. We got great guests. We got it all going on. GoJo and Golic starts right now.
Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield here with you all. We got a great one coming up today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern here on the DraftKings Network. And subscribe to the YouTube channel, GoJo and Golic there. As Jesse mentioned, Marty Smith going to join us today, was at the Cotton Bowl as well for that incredible Jack Sawyer play by Ohio State that now sent them to the national title to face off with Notre Dame. And yeah, we get to see Tiger Woods back on a golf course, albeit a digitally recreated one inside of a large indoor building, but we'll take what we can get at this point. Beggars can't be choosers. Jason Fitz also going to join us on the program here. As to Jesse's point, we're going to comb through the wreckage of teams now sent home from the playoffs and try and figure out who is best situated going forward to have some success and what the hell we're going to do with this Pittsburgh Steelers job, considering all the hubbubaloo about Mike Tomlin. But Dad, that was a good old-fashioned ass-whooping last night, courtesy of the Los Angeles Rams on what was Monday Night Football, the Wildcard playoff round edition here. They come out here and completely overwhelm this Minnesota Vikings team and get a massive win here, not 27-9 in a game where, listen, it's hard to ignore the backdrop of what's gone on here. This game displaced by the wildfires in California. And you heard from Sean McVay and pretty much everyone involved with this Rams outfit, Dad. They understood the responsibility that they had to come out and try and put on a good show and bring some sort of distraction to a bunch of people going through tragedy and going through a really hard time. And they came out with that intensity. There were plenty of people. The Rams had bussed about 1,500 of their season ticket holders from Los Angeles to Arizona. They had tried to make it as much like a Rams home game as possible. And Dad, apparently that worked, because 9 sacks later, this team completely overwhelmed Sam Darnold and this Minnesota Vikings team. I'd have to imagine, as a former defensive player, watching what they were able to put together on that side of the ball made your heart sing.
Reminded me of a game that when I was in Philly, we had against the Cowboys, where we had 11 sacks. The guy who had 11 and a half career sacks, had 2.5 sacks in that game. I basically had 1/5 of all my sacks in one game against the Cowboys. We had 11 sacks. It was just an incredible, massive, sack game, which it was last night. I mean, Darnold ended up throwing the ball, 40 times, completed 25, sacked 9 times. 8 different players had at least a half a sack. 6 different players had at least 1 sack in this game. So again, you multiply pressures by 2 over sacks. So even when he wasn't getting sacked, he was getting pressured. Threw an interception. There was a strip sack by Okella Witherspoon, DB, who blitzed the blind side that Jared Verse scooped 57 yards and a score. That while it's 27-9, this was a defensive effort by the Rams, by this young Rams team, this young Rams D-line. Because we were wondering, Mike, going into the game, where did the offense go? I had given the scores of the later games in the season. Week 17 in a win, 13 points, and 19 points in a win against the Jets, 12 points in a win against the 49ers. This defense, or this offense at full strength, had not been scoring. Cooper Kupp still isn't. He had 1 target last night. Hasn't been a big part of this offense. It's been the defense that's been getting the job done, because in those games I mentioned, they held the 49ers to 6 points. They held the Jets to 9 points. They held the Cardinals to 9 points. This youthful defense has been getting it done. So, and they got it done again last night. Just an absolute barrage on Sam Darnold, who, listen, struggled his last 2. Now, when you're sacked 9 times, everyone's going to say, oh, Sam Darnold cost himself some money. And maybe he did. Maybe he did.
Oh, he definitely.
When you are sacked 9 times.
I don't think there's any denying that Sam Darnold over the last 2 games has probably cost himself.
Yes.
Now, we'll see how much, but he has cost himself money. There's no doubt, because we know, unfortunately, the burden of proof was always going to be on Sam Darnold to prove a bunch of people that had watched him play football his entire career wrong. And while he had done so for the majority of the season and to the tune of 14 wins, Dad, against the best competition they faced here at the end of the season when it matters the most, and Sam would even admit this, they came up woefully short. And while he wasn't the only part of it, you're right, that offensive line is going to have a lot to answer for when they click on the film. Sam Darnold did himself no favors in this game in terms of holding on to the ball for as long as he did.
You're right. He definitely cost himself probably years and money, depending on what other teams think as well, because he's going to be a free agent. And if you're Minnesota, obviously what we talk about them as they are going to go into the offseason. Do they put it all on J.J. McCarthy? Do they keep Sam as a bridge? Does Sam stay as a bridge? Those are questions to be answered. But you're right. They had 14 wins in the regular season and were still 4th worst in sacks. Sam was sacked 49 times during the regular season. So it's not like he wasn't getting pressure during the season, and they still had 14 wins, but against a better competition, especially, like Detroit, and certainly in this game, it was a struggle. It was a struggle for him. It was a struggle for the offense. But boy, oh boy, do you have to hold up the Rams defense, which, by the way, this is why it's tough to look at stats in the regular season. The Rams defense was 26th in total, 26th against the pass, 22nd against the run. And they just absolutely stood up and just demolished this Minnesota offense.
They're not consistent, but they're explosive. And I think during a lot of the season, we know they had to do a lot of moving bodies around in the back end of that defense that you mentioned. Okella Witherspoon, Cameron Kinshins, Quentin Lake played a phenomenal game. I thought that group tackled and stuck with receivers really well for Minnesota. Obviously, they were going to double Justin Jefferson a bunch, but you go back and look at a lot of these sacks, and in addition to plenty of exotics up front, finding creative ways to get to a 4-man rush that stressed an offensive line that, quite honestly, from the first sack on, really got overwhelmed physically. I thought the back end held up their end of the bargain really well here. But to your point, that group, second youngest defense in the NFL, I believe, behind Green Bay, and the most snaps by rookies on defense this season here. That had been that group, one of the best pressure groups in the NFL all season long. They just converted those pressures into sacks at the right time, and had Sam Darnold had kind of turned back into a pumpkin. So I want to give the credit to the Los Angeles Rams on this, because they played great complementary football from the start here. They forced explosive plays on defense. You look at what Matthew Stafford did at the beginning of this game. I think the Vikings blitzed him on his first 9 dropbacks, and he carved them up for over 100 yards and got them down into the end zone. So they set the tone, Dad, going after a Vikings defense where you've covered this team. They do a lot of things really well. Defend the deep passing, and the passing attack in general was not one of them. And so the Rams game plan was clear. They were going to come out and play action, pass them to death, and against the blitz and against man coverage, Matthew Stafford was lights out to start this game, and it really put the Minnesota Vikings on their heels and had them going to their second pitch early. And then offensively for them, Sam Darnold unfortunately reverted back. Now, coming into this game, he averaged the third longest time to throw this season in the NFL. His third longest time to throw, just over 3 seconds, while attempting 73% of his passes after 2.5 seconds, the highest rate in the NFL this season. And coming into the game, he averaged almost 3 seconds in the pocket, which is the longest in the league by a quarterback in the next-gen stats era, going back to 2016. So a guy who held the ball a lot, but had an offense that could usually help around him provide open throws with all of the weapons that they had. And those throws weren't there. And so you saw him patting the ball, and even some frustration. Kevin O'Connell after the game talking about the missed opportunity for the Minnesota Vikings.
Sam's body of work, what he was able to do this year, when not very many people thought he would be able to lead a team to 14 wins. Very rare for a quarterback in their first year. In fact, it is rare, the most wins by a first-year quarterback with a team. And just the way he came in, committed himself to just a daily process to be the best version of himself. It did not work out in the end, and I think Sam would be the first one to tell you.
So, Dad, before we get to Sam Darnold and his immediate future, this Rams team, based on what you've known about them throughout the entire season, we said about a month ago they were probably the team nobody wanted to see in the playoffs, and they just showed you why in this game, upending a Vikings team that up until the last week of the season had a shot for the 1 seed in the NFC. So now this Rams team gets set to take on the Philadelphia Eagles. I think they're close to a touchdown dog. Do you think they can author this upset based on what you saw from the Eagles this weekend as well?
Well, they sacked Minnesota and Sam Darnold 9 times. It's going to be stopping the run for Philadelphia, because Philadelphia, listen, I said Minnesota gave up 49 sacks in the regular season. Philadelphia gave up 45. So they weren't far behind in the giving up sacks. But let's talk about run block. These two teams played in week 12, and Philly had a college rushing day. Philly rushed for 314 yards. Saquon Barkley ran for 255 yards. They ran all over the Rams, and that's what they're going to try and do in this game. And it's in Philly. That game was in LA. It's in Philly. It's going to be in the 30s, where running the ball and defense are going to be key. So while they got after Sam Darnold, the passer, they're going to have to force Philadelphia into a passing game, and we'll see if they can do that, because Philly, second best running team, and they ran it on the Rams in week 12. They run it basically on everybody. So that's going to be the task for the Rams, is to stop the Philadelphia Eagle run.
Yep, and that's going to be a markedly different challenge than this one, where, like you said, it was, hey, let's see how much we can throw at Sam Darnold. 12 different defenders had a pressure on Sam Darnold in this game, because you knew they wanted to air it out more than anything else, and the game script dictated that. Can you get the Eagles behind in the game script so that they have to air it out a little bit more? Because if not, we know left to their own devices what Philadelphia wants to be. And then on the other side, Matthew Stafford in this game faced blitzes on 69% of his dropbacks, the highest rate he's faced in a game this season, including the playoffs. Philadelphia, a very different defensive attack. We saw what that defensive line, Nolan Smith coming off a big game for Philadelphia, just authored. So that's going to be a really interesting matchup, and we have time to get to there. Dad, for Sam Darnold, I always thought the best course of action was going to be Minnesota and Sam Darnold find a way to make it work. Even when we were looking at him with rose-colored glasses on this season, I thought, hey, a short-term deal, still make him the bridge guy, almost what Atlanta was trying to do with Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix Jr. You do that with him and J.J. McCarthy, who's coming back off an injury and missed his entire rookie season of being able to develop. That's going to take time here. I think now you just get that at a lesser price. Like, I don't know for the outside world who's going to look at Sam Darnold and unfortunately not be affected by this lasting image from the last 2 games and give him $50+ million a year to quarterback a team outside that's not coordinated by Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah, he's not going to get $50 million a year. It's just going to be a matter of what Minnesota offers, and I think it'll be a shorter term waiting for J.J. McCarthy and let Sam be maybe a year, maybe 2, maybe a half a year, maybe an X amount of games bridge. So what's the deal? You mentioned the Kirk Cousins deal was $180 million with $100 million guaranteed. Now also remember the Baker Mayfield deal that he signed with Tampa Bay was a 3-year $100 million deal with $50 million guaranteed. So will it be between those two, like a 3-year deal, with between 50 and 100 million guaranteed for this year's body of work? And then you have to throw in, will somebody else offer him more? Will somebody else take a chance and say, we like the good that we saw? Because there was good out of Sam Darnold this year. Do we like the good enough to make it a bigger deal? I probably doubt it. I would not think it would go over 3 years. It depends on if he feels comfortable staying with Minnesota, knowing J.J. McCarthy is in the wings, just like Michael Penix Jr. was in the wings for Cousins.
We can get into more of this with Jason Fitz coming up in hour number 2 here and try and figure out the future for Sam. But, Jesse, I want to get to the other part of the broadcast experience last night on Monday Night Football that included America's team, the Dallas Cowboys, and all of the mess that this coaching situation is about to turn into.
Yeah, Troy Aikman had some things to say. So obviously we know Mike McCarthy's contract expires at midnight tonight. Jerry Jones and the Cowboys not going to be renewing it here. He just let this thing run out. Apparently negotiations stalled. They've mutually decided to go in their separate ways. We know that the Bears are interested in McCarthy, the Saints as well. So we got some interest in McCarthy, but what about the Cowboys job? Well, last night before the game, Troy Aikman had this to say, and people might not exactly be clamoring to get in the door.
Suggests that there's not a real plan. I mean, in the fact that they haven't had the opportunity to maybe interview a Ben Johnson and some of these others, Aaron Glenn. Beyond that, it's hard to imagine. As far as a coveted job, I don't know that that's accurate. I mean, really? I do think the Cowboys are obviously a high-profile team. Whoever is covering or whoever is head coach of that team is certainly going to draw a lot of attention. But I think most football people that take over as a head coach, they want to do it on their terms. I love the Dallas Cowboys. I played there for 12 years. I wish them well. But to say that it's a coveted job, I'm not sure I would necessarily agree with that.
And guys, let me just physically buckle in because apparently Deion Sanders might be the guy for the job. They're talking. So it's honestly, this is like the perfect type of gossip that we love for our show to be able to talk about.
It could not fit better here. Jerry Jones understands the content machine as well as anybody. Doesn't understand running a football team to success as well as I'm sure Cowboys fans would like. But, Dad, yeah, that was the latest development during the game last night. Both Deion Sanders and Jerry Jones confirming that there has been an initial conversation. No interview scheduled yet, but an open conversation. Deion Sanders talked about, what an honor it is hearing from Jerry Jones. And when they pick up the phone, obviously there's some interest, but reiterated how happy he is in Colorado. Dad, Jerry Jones seems like just a different enough guy to where this, to me, in my mind, is simultaneously something that I would not be surprised if he did based on his relationship with Deion, what we know Jerry likes about the attention economy, and also seems like the perfect distraction for what Troy mentioned, which is the entire way that they handled this Mike McCarthy process reeks of an organization that does not actually know what it's doing.
And I agree with Troy. It's a high-profile job and not necessarily a coveted job, especially by an experienced head coach. Now, a new head coach may not have choices and say, "Oh, I gotta start somewhere and take the job." To me, this just emphasizes what Jimmy Johnson meant to that organization when Jerry Jones first bought it, and Jimmy Johnson won 2 Super Bowls, and it was his team that Barry Switzer was coaching that won the Super Bowl in '96. It was the players that Jimmy Johnson had gotten back when the coach had a little bit of power. But now Jerry runs it, and Jerry isn't running it very well. So again, I don't know if it's a coveted job. And as Jesse said, he did talk to Deion, and they didn't negotiate or anything, but they're probably going to talk again. I agree. I don't think it's a coveted job. I mean, Jerry Jones has not run this team very well over the last few years. They're now looking for their 9th head coach since he bought the team in '89.
And now they will not be able to interview a host of the head coaching candidates. Adam Schefter outlined yesterday that because they waited this long with Mike McCarthy and blocked him from doing interviews to ultimately let him go, They also missed their window in the playoffs to interview candidates on teams that are still playing, like Ben Johnson, like Aaron Glenn, like Steve Spagnuolo, who now he can't interview until after their season is over. And so if they were in the market for any of those candidates, you get to wait a little longer, but I'm sure now Jerry will gaslight us all into believing that Deion Sanders or some other Kellen Moore-esque candidate was going to be the plan all along here. Our plan all along is to talk to Marty Smith coming up next here on GoJo and Golic. All right, we got some big stuff coming up tonight here. TGL match number 2 airs tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN and ESPN Plus, and we're going to get Tiger Woods playing for the first time as the Jupiter Lynx team takes on the Los Angeles Golf Club here. Going to be awesome, and for more on that, joining us on GoJo and Golic here is Marty Smith. Obviously, you can check him out, co-host of Marty and McGee on Saturday mornings. He is one of the best college football reporters out there as well, and he'll be a part of the broadcast as he was the first time out for TGL as it gets set to get going here again. Marty, good morning, brother. How you doing?
Gentlemen, good morning from the Charlotte Douglas International Airport, the Admiral Club. When you're an ESPN reporter, this is where you live. I should be paying taxes in this place. But it's going to be amazing tonight to get to see Tiger debut himself in this league that was his vision and Rory's vision for a way to grow the game and a way to really inject interest into the younger generation for golf. And the debut was a rousing success. All of us were obviously thrilled with the rating and the way that people responded to it. And it's a transitionary period. You know, it's going to take some getting used to. These PGA Tour stars hitting into a 5-story screen is a little different deal. But when it's Tiger Woods that's hitting into that screen, I think it has the opportunity to be must-see. And I hope everybody tunes in tonight. And for those of you who may not be familiar with it, all of the players are mic'd at all times. All the players have earpieces so they can hear the broadcast, they can hear one another, and thereby engage in it real time. And I can't wait to see how Tiger does that. It wouldn't break my heart if he says a few choice words that maybe aren't suitable for standard television.
We definitely could get that. For those that haven't seen it or I tuned in and watched it, and the thing that struck me, Marty, was, and I don't know if you can put it into words, the size of the place, the size of the screen, how big the arena was. I didn't expect that.
So it's about 1,500 attendees, 1,500 to 2,000 or so, Mike, and that screen is 5 stories tall. It's basically 24, 25 times larger than any simulator you've ever hit into, any simulator you've ever seen. It's massive. And it's interesting on the player level because when you talk to them about it, you know, last week we had the New York Golf Club and the Bay Golf Club, and speaking with Ricky Fowler and Xander Schauffele about kind of the difference, you can still see ball flight because they're teeing off. There are 2 separate tees. The back tees are 35 yards from that 5-story screen. The forward tees are 21 yards from that 5-story screen. They use the back tees anything 130 yards and further in terms of the shot length. And then anything 130 to 50, they use those forward tees, anything 50 in. We actually have a green that rotates, and there's these jacks underneath that green that change the undulation. So it's fascinating technology. I mean, it's far, far beyond my feeble-minded comprehension. But actually being in there and seeing it and watching those guys manage it and manipulate it was fascinating to me. These are the best players in the world. I mean, we have PGA Tour stars every single week. And to see those guys be frustrated with it at times, the New York guys struggled. And so it's a fascinating facility, and the technology is just jaw-dropping.
It really is larger than life when you look at it and it renders on TV. So it's a really interesting product. You mentioned talking to some of the players there, obviously some of the things that were similar, being able to see ball flight here. What was the biggest adjustment that these guys had to make when you talked to them after going through it the first time around?
Yeah, there are several. There are several. You know, hitting into a screen in and of itself is a little different, but they're hitting off natural surfaces, which they're used to. There's a lot of things that they're going to have to get used to, but ultimately at the end of it, it's still golf, and these guys are the best in the world, and they'll adjust to it as we go. But I think the biggest adjustment is just hitting into that screen.
And now normally you mentioned it's 24, 25 times bigger than a simulator. And when you think simulator simulates not only golf, but golf courses like Augusta, Pebble Beach, whatever. These are specially designed holes, are they not? They're not replications of any golf course, are they?
Yeah, 30 specially designed intricate holes that we'll use this season. And there's 15 each. There's 15 rounds. The first 10 are alternate shot, and then the last 5 are one-on-one. And so it makes for an interesting dynamic because you have team golf and your guys are really counting on you. And that's one thing to me that is, there's nothing better than the Ryder Cup and seeing how that team golf unfolds, because in what is predominantly most of the time an individual sport, you got guys counting on you and busting your chops and telling you, come on, man, you got to step up. So it was fun to watch the first week. And I just, tonight should be hilarious because Tiger's teammates are Max Homa and Kevin Kisner. And those are two of the funniest people in sports. So I can't wait to see how they take to this broadcast scenario.
It's going to be incredible. Again, 7 o'clock Eastern tonight on ESPN and ESPN Plus. You get to see Tiger Woods. You get to hear Max Homa, which if you have not before, everyone buckle in because he is worth the price of admission every single time here. Marty, you mentioned the team aspect of it. Let's talk about another team sport that you're going to be a part of covering here soon as well. You're going to be at the national championship in Atlanta. You were at the Cotton Bowl for that incredible Ohio State comeback. Take us through what it was like in the building, seeing this Ohio State team finally claw all the way back from the depths they were at after that Michigan game.
Awesome. It was, we overused the word electric, but in that building, the energy was wonderful. The energy was everything that we love so much about the sport. And to your point, when you have a team that is as talented as Ohio State is, that had the expectations that Ohio State had from all of us entering the season with that narrative of their 8-figure roster. And then you go lose to Michigan, and everyone, I mean, you can't be more criticized than those young people were, and certainly Ryan Day was. Asinine that people were questioning whether he should lose his job, in my opinion, but nonetheless, that was the case. And now they were able to use that failure as fuel to get to a place where they're right here on the precipice of a national championship. And it's a completely different football team than we saw during the regular season. It's not the same group. There was a players only meeting where Jack Sawyer, where those guys that are the senior leadership, the experienced leadership of this group, Will Howard, there was a lot of hard things said. There was a lot of things that are hard to hear that were stated in that meeting. And what can that do? Again, you guys have both lived it. That can either fracture a locker room or it can galvanize a locker room. And in Ohio State's case, it did the latter. And they just look like world beaters right now. They're just damn good. And it was wild to watch. I mean, that strip sack by Sawyer was as loud a stadium as I've ever been in. It was wild.
So early kind of look at the title game. Notre Dame gets there. They're like, what, an 8.5 point underdog. And it's a team that just kind of finds a way to win. But I know Ohio State's heavily favored. How do you, and this early look at the game, how do you see it?
I think Marcus Freeman's done a remarkable job. I admire him in so many different ways. He's a fantastic leader. He is someone who is so good at delegation, which is hard sometimes for head coaches to do. And those players love that man. They too have a great group of just tough as hell, very determined young men. And they seem, but both of these teams, it's interesting, seemed like they were destined to be here. And I don't know, I guess you said it's 8.5. I'm not a bettor. I don't pay attention to that stuff too closely, but that seems a little high to me. I think this is going to be a really good football game. I lean Buckeyes just because of the momentum that they have, of the way that they're playing the game. The intentionality that they have right now offensively. I think it's wild that, they beat Texas and Jeremiah Smith was a non-factor. I mean, there were times when I'm sure you guys saw that, either watched tape or saw that at times they had 3 guys bracketing number 4 in that game. That's ridiculous. And we'll see how Coach Freeman and his group plan to manage number 4 and how Coach Kelly and his group combat that. But I just think this is going to be a fantastic football game. And hopefully it's a close one so that the whole world's watching the whole time for us.
Yeah, never hurts when the number coming off that one is good. And with these two brands, I would imagine that number is probably going to be in a pretty good place here. But you mentioned it. There's going to be some great matchups in that game. The Ohio State defense is incredible. You look at Chip Kelly against Al Golden as a matchup of two incredible coordinators that have both been head coaches before Chip Kelly very recently. Going to be incredible there. So, Marty, I do want to talk about the other part of this, and you're someone who has lived a lot of your life in the SEC footprint and covered that conference extensively. Is now 2 straight years where there's not going to be an SEC team competing in the college football playoff national championship here. Is the sky falling around Greg Sankey's office? Are things starting to burn randomly? Like, what's going on with this conference? And is this a trend that you're buying into, or is this just a couple of year blips on a radar that's otherwise been dominated by this conference?
And we've thought about it a lot. And I spend the vast majority of my time in that league, covering that league extensively. Certainly, Greg Sankey is not happy about that. Certainly, it's something that he didn't expect. But in this era of college football, I don't know why this is surprising. I just don't. That league is merciless during the regular season. It's incredibly physical. Every one of those teams that made it from the SEC had impossible schedules. If you go look at the schedules, and that's not the case for some other teams. And when it got to the point where they had to execute at the level that got them to that place, it just didn't happen, whether that was Georgia against Notre Dame. They had very costly turnovers. They gave up a special teams touchdown, a kickoff return for a touchdown, and then you get to last week when Texas was playing against Ohio State. They had untimely turnovers and didn't execute when it mattered. To think the sky's falling in the league, though, is a laughable narrative for me anyway. I mean, I just think that's funny. It's not like recruiting has fallen off to a tremendous degree. I mean, there's a lot of layers of sky is falling. Sure. And just because they're not playing for a national championship, in my opinion, does not warrant that narrative. Now, if you're someone that cheers for a team in another league, congratulations, because you get to enjoy that. But look, I mean, it's Ohio State and Notre Dame, man.
Yeah.
I mean, this is two blue blood, wonderful marquee programs that have great players everywhere. And so they are worthy. And this is going to be an awesome national championship game, period.
Yeah, to your point, not a pair of plucky underdogs necessarily that found their way here, and a conference in the SEC that certainly showed us this weekend the depth of talent is still clearly there. The depth of talent will be on display as well again tonight. Again, check him out. Marty Smith going to be on the coverage for TGL, 7 o'clock Eastern tonight on ESPN and ESPN+. We're looking forward to it. Marty, always great catching up with you, brother. Can't wait to see you in Atlanta. Safe travels, and take a couple of bars and make sure your airline lounge experience is worth it today. All right, brother?
Appreciate you guys. Love y'all.
Thanks, Marty.
Love you too, brother. Always great catching up with the great Marty Smith from ESPN, kind enough to join us. Coming up next, we will take an early look at the marquee matchup of the divisional round as two MVP candidates square off. Next on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We officially closed out Wildcard weekend with last night's game in Arizona. So let's hand out our Offensive Lineman of the Week award presented by Campbell's Chunky Soup that eats like a meal. Now, we don't always give credit to the Bills' offensive line because Josh Allen is back there scrambling, making plays, making magic. But a big game on Sunday. So who gets the award, fellas?
Yeah, Jesse, as you mentioned it, Josh Allen obviously is going to be the star of the show there. He's one of the very deserving MVP candidates that's going to go up against another in Lamar Jackson this round here. But that group in front of him has continued to be one of the most dominant in the NFL this year. And it could be easy to give it to a guy like Deion Dawkins, who's been a great left tackle for them for a while now. Spencer Brown, who has had a phenomenal year and really played probably his best football of his entire career. But, Dad, how about Alec Anderson here? For an offensive line that uses 6 offensive linemen, that jumbo set more than any in the NFL, Alec Anderson is the guy who comes in and helps make that happen there. They've been as successful as any team in football in using that formation. They utilize 6 or more offensive linemen on 22% of their snaps against the Broncos, which is the 3rd highest rate in the game this season. So I'm going to give it to Alec Anderson, man, a guy coming in, rotational guy that has been given an opportunity to go and make a big impact on their season and has become an invaluable part of the way that they've approached every game, and Dad, a way that they're going to approach this Baltimore Ravens defense that, a lot like Denver, one of the best rush defenses in the NFL, and that did not matter. Buffalo overpowered them, and I'm sure they're going to try and do something similar to Baltimore.
Yeah, Alec Anderson, you mentioned one of the more popular 6 O-linemen as they use, but we know the most popular is Dan Skipper from Detroit. When he comes in, everybody, goes nuts, but listen, Buffalo runs the ball well. They ran for 210 yards against Denver. And you mentioned Denver, one of the best in stopping the run. Baltimore is one of the best in stopping the run. So this is a classic matchup with this Baltimore defense and the rush offense before you even get into Josh Allen throwing the ball or Josh Allen running the ball. I'm looking forward to calling this one. Let me tell you, again, the MVP race is over. The votes are in, but these are the 2 top candidates, both expected to lead their teams to the promised land, which neither has done. And that's starting to create a little bit of, okay, guys, when are you playing at MVP levels? Lamar, you've got 2 of them. When are you going to take the team over the top?
Yeah, it's the amount of times they're going to say pressure on the sports talk debate shows this week in the lead up to this game might break the game itself. But it's apt at, and it's interesting because the winner of this game is going to get the opportunity to go on further. But we know sort of the same way, and we had this conversation in college when it came to the CFP and a team like Penn State, where James Franklin has this big game moniker that's latched onto him, and you beat SMU and you beat Boise State, and it doesn't necessarily satisfy the sweet tooth the same way it would have if they had beat Notre Dame. I do feel like for Lamar Jackson, or especially for Josh Allen, the final boss and the way that we're going to judge them is still going to be, hey, can you beat that team from Kansas City or not? Like, winning this game against other teams that, to your point, have had a flawed resume when it's come to the postseason is one thing, but it's still like, all right, you get through this game and it's really just the invitational to figure out who is going to head to Arrowhead and take on that team. So it's the tough challenge for the narrative portion of this. But for the football portion of it, Dad, I mean, we've got a long time till game day. I know you're not going to pick this game, obviously, because like you said, you're calling it for Westwood 1. It's just such a tough read because it sounds like Zay Flowers should be available for Baltimore, which is huge for them in a passing attack going up against a Bills defense that played some of its best football this past weekend in that win against Denver. But we know in general, and the safety room has been less talented than in years past and dealing with some turnover there. It's just a really hard game to get a read on because on their best day, this Baltimore Ravens offense, with everything that it can throw at you, feels like it should be unstoppable overall, but you could say the same thing about the simplistic brutality of Buffalo on the other side too, who I think in this game, Dad, if you were going to gauge it, Buffalo, the better offensive line, and Baltimore, clearly the better weapons around the quarterback, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you mentioned Zay Flowers is supposed to play. The weather is going to be cold. It's going to be dry, it looks like, but cold. Yeah. 22 is a high, so it'll probably be in the teens or lower if there's any wind in Buffalo. And listen, they really need Zay Flowers as they go up the ladder here and against Pittsburgh. Now, they didn't really need the passing game against Pittsburgh. They ran for 299 yards. But the leading receiver was Justice Hill, the running back out of the backfield. And then the two after that were both tight ends, Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews, who obviously can have a big impact on the game. But Zay Flowers is not only that deep threat, he's also the motion guy as well on offense. And that was missing from this offense. And they need to get their to full strength to go against a team like Buffalo. So I am really, really looking forward to this matchup where either quarterback can pull a team out of the fire and carry them on their backs. Now, they both have excellent teams around them, but so much is going to be talked about with the quarterbacks and what's on the quarterback's shoulders to help their team advance.
Yeah, it's interesting because Lamar Jackson, I think you could argue, needs some of the postseason success more just because of the weight of overwhelming accomplishment he's had during the regular season. But, Dad, This is sort of where Josh Allen has made his reputation with a few banner postseason performances in years past that have buoyed a player that's made some of the most dramatic improvement we've ever seen, but doesn't have all the regular season hardware that Lamar Jackson has. Again, it's going to be 3 MVPs to none, and that's not to say that Josh Allen hasn't played MVP caliber football. But if you're going to be legislating these quarterbacks after their careers are done, Josh Allen probably needs to go and snatch some postseason success and maybe puts a little bit more pressure on him at this point of his career at this stage of the game than his counterpart across the field, although it is 1A, 1B if we're doing anything in that conversation. So we've got plenty of time to get to that game and everything going on here. But Jesse, let's get to a little bit of postmortem on the Steelers, but first an interesting conversation that we saw over the weekend as well.
Yeah, so we had a little moment there, Senior. You were calling the Ravens-Steelers game, and you were on the field prior to the game. So it was you, Arthur Smith, Kirk Herbstreit, and this guy, a tweeter, that sounds so weird, but a guy who took video of this and put it on Twitter, Tim Nolan, jokes it was you guys making a friendly bet for the national championship game. Senior, does Kirk have to wear any Irish gear on the next broadcast? And did you get to pet Peter? Was he there? I don't know. Does he hang out on the sidelines?
No, Peter was at the hotel. The NFL has different rules about the dog on the field than college does. It's something that we were talking about, obviously with Kirk Herbstreit and had Ben, his dog that had passed away. Now he has Peter on the road. But he showed me Peter at the hotel eating some whipped cream and enjoying life in the hotel. And actually Roger Goodell was there. We both talked to Roger, and Herbie was saying, I need to talk to Roger about, hey, can I let my dog down on an NFL field? I mean, what's the deal? So he went right to the top source there in Roger Goodell, and I don't know what they worked out. But no, I can confirm we did not put a bet on the game. It was just really good chatter on the field, me, Herbie, and Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator for the Steelers, before, unfortunately, Arthur Smith is now in the offseason.
Well, and I was going to ask, because as we sort of look at this Steelers team in the rearview mirror now, we had a little bit of precursory conversation yesterday about, is this as simple as a quarterback problem in a side of football in the AFC that demands you have a future Hall of Famer? Or is it more than that, Dad? For Arthur Smith, who was brought over here to try and inject some of the creativity in the run game that's been a hallmark for him, get the best out of Russell Wilson with the play action passing that for years helped a quarterback like Ryan Tannehill shine? Or is there more to it than that in your mind? When you just saw this Pittsburgh Steelers team, Dad, and got to peek under the hood here, do you think it's more than just oversimplifying it down to the quarterback for why this franchise has a clear ceiling on it right now in the wild card round of the playoffs?
I mean, the Steelers are what you thought the Steelers would be outside of obviously the championship years. Is they're a good running team with a good defense. And the last time they had a good passing game was with Ben Roethlisberger. And they're still trying to find a quarterback that could complement the running attack with the passing attack. And they've gone through, the Mitch Trubisky's and the Kenny Pickett's and the Mason Rudolphs since Roethlisberger, and now obviously Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. And they're both free agents, Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. Russell says he wants to be back in Pittsburgh, but they don't have the passing game that complements the running game right now. The offensive line has some issues as well. But while I talk about the running game and the defense, they're good, but I don't think they're great to overcome the lack of a passing attack. And you have basically George Pickens, who, can be up or down. He was second in receptions. And Pat Freiermuth, the tight end, who led in receptions with 65. Pickens had 59 on 103 targets. So those are your leading receivers. After that, you have receivers that are in the 30s. A Jalen Warren, a running back, a Calvin Austin III, a wide receiver. So you could use some upgrade at the wide receiver position. But you need a passing quarterback. And Justin Fields, we know, has struggled there, but he mixes the run in well. And Russell Wilson is not the passing quarterback he was in Seattle. So what do you do? I mean, do you draft and start all over with a rookie? Or do you get another veteran? Do you bring Russell Wilson back? But I don't know how much changes. That's the thing. They're kind of caught while Mike Tomlin has been over 500 all 18 years he's been there, and he has a Super Bowl, obviously, but as of late, they've been kind of middling, right? Where they don't get a high draft pick, they don't have a low draft pick, they're kind of right in the middle. And they're just kind of a middling team that makes the playoffs, but you don't fear them going far in the playoffs until they upgrade.
It's interesting to me because yesterday I said all of this is just window dressing for a conversation about a quarterback that's not on this roster, and it's their fault, Mike Tomlin included, who I'm sure has more say in player personnel than most head coaches in the league given his tenure, for not addressing this towards the end of Ben's franchise over actually setting their franchise up for future success. Because then you go and draft Kenny Pickett, who is not up to the challenge, and now you're so far behind the eight ball, it's going to be hard to pull yourself out because, Dad, most fan bases would kill for the kind of consistent success that the Steelers have enjoyed over this run with Mike Tomlin. And even this year, they were leading the division for a long time. They're a double-digit win playoff team. They looked better than last year at times. But this is still a group where, to your point, like, you got to squint a little bit to see it. Like, even the defense wasn't quite itself towards the end of the season. And guys like Cam Hayward are getting older. There clearly were some harsh feelings about some members of that defense not holding their end of the bargain. George Pickens represents a paradigm that's been in Pittsburgh for a while. Again, they had Antonio Brown there, and for years we did not know what a problem he would become because they were able to keep that under wraps in the locker room, and success and a great quarterback masked that in a way that with George Pickens now is not possible. These young skill players on the Steelers the last few years have spoken their mind in a way that's atypical. And I sat around yesterday and I thought about it, Dad, thinking of another team that's led by a tenured head coach who's about culture, defense, establishing the line of scrimmage, in Jim Harbaugh and the Los Angeles Chargers. And I said, because I was thinking, hey, if you brought Jim, I think I heard on the Dominique Foxworth show, someone had a slip of the tongue and talked about Justin Herbert eventually ending up on the Steelers. And I was like, oh, would that solve all their problems right now? And then I thought about it. The Chargers are an incredibly similar team with a much better quarterback, at least talent-wise, upgrading there, who just authored one of the worst playoff games that we've ever seen and lost to an infinitely worse team in the Houston Texans than did the Pittsburgh Steelers, who lost to one of probably four best teams left in the whole dance here. So I do wonder if some of the proximity to a team like Baltimore exacerbates this conversation a bit. But, Dad, I still kind of come back to the same answer, to where they have got to get more dynamic overall as a team in a way, whether it's Mike Tomlin or the front office there, has seemed to resist right now. They have been stuck in wanting to do football one way, that in their division in particular with the two guys you have to face. And we know the task is always get out of your division first. And right now the AFC North that the Pittsburgh Steelers are trying to beat is a dated model here. It's one that does not account for the passing attack and the dynamic offense that Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson both bring to their teams. And so while it is a more complicated conversation overall philosophically, I do think at the end of the day it comes back to what it represents at quarterback, them miscalculating and planning poorly at that position, and now just not having enough firepower to go out there and be competitive until they find a way. To your point, there are no easy paths to that based on where the Pittsburgh Steelers sit, but until they find a way back to revamping that point of the team, they're going to keep doing exactly this, and their fan base is going to keep feeling this exact same level of frustration.
Friday, we've got the Unrivaled opener 3-on-3 women's basketball in Miami. And of course, we have you covered on the DraftKings Sportsbook. Check out the odds here. Both games on Friday are pick'ems. Brianna Stewart's Miss take on Nafisa Collier's Lunar Owls to open the action. Angel Reese and Chelsea Gray are on the Rose. They play Arike Ngumbawale's Vinyl in the second game. Excited for the league to start. And guys, all the action is on DraftKings Sportsbook. We're going to have plenty to break down on Unrivaled next week. A few of our friends are on the call, including Roz Gold on Woody and Brendan Glasheen, so we're going to check in with them throughout the winter. Up next, though, Fitz going to join us to break down the latest in football, probably with some more bad food takes. He doesn't like beignets.
All right, hour number 2 here of GoJo and Golic starting. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield. I'm down in New Orleans, by the way, getting ready to shoot some stuff that'll be a part of our Super Bowl coverage out here in New Orleans when we get to February. So excited to share that with you guys eventually here. I had to make my bed this morning. I resisted at this point because my dad harps on it so much in a way that felt weird to me, but it is so central to the shot today that ignoring the elephant in the room and having it too disheveled seemed like it was going to make it a big deal. So Jason Fitz joining us here in hour number 2. You guys can check him out over at Yahoo Sports as a host and analyst here, the College Football Power Hour inside coverage. Fitzy, are you a make the bed guy on the road when you're in the hotel? Have we had this discussion before?
Yeah, well, okay, so I'm a make the bed guy at home every day. In a hotel, no. But I got the habit when I was living on a tour bus that I made my bed every day, because otherwise after a couple of days, like, it just gets so frantic on a tour bus that you just have to. So I got in the habit. So I feel this peace when I have the bed made, but no, like I'm definitely if I'm in a hotel, I'm basically on vacation. And that means that, like, I'm not the guy that's like, stay out of my hotel room. I'm the guy that's like, don't let me lift a finger. You guys go ahead. I'll tip you at the end and make my bed every day. Yeah, that 100%.
Yeah, that's we've talked about this. I put the do not disturb on if I'm there for a couple of days and I don't have any service at all. and don't make the bed at all, throw stuff on the ground. But then before I leave, I straighten up. I don't make the bed, but I pick up the trash off the floor and I kind of straighten up. But I don't want to be like bothered through the 2 days that I'm there. So I just kind of make a mess of the place, but then clean it up before I leave.
I respect that. I think there's a lot of logic to that too. Like some people are very like, I don't want people in my stuff. So I totally get that. I think for me, it's just, hey, it's rare I don't have to make my own bed. So now if somebody else will make my bed for me, that seems like a win. I'll do that. You know, I'm proud of you, by the way, for making your bed this morning. I think that's like, I'm a little surprised. Also, I feel for whatever people are in the room next to you because, you know, you're boisterous and everything. So they're getting a free show. This is one of the best parts of what we do.
It's the one thing that I will say when I'm in a city like Las Vegas or a city like New Orleans, I feel a little less bad about it than I would elsewhere, considering that there are people up at all hours of the night here. Were last night. Now, very few of them are up in the morning and might get an early wake-up call, but I had to just hear them yell on Bourbon Street, so you get to hear me yell into the microphone now, and that's the fair trade-off that we have going on. Fitzy, you talked about tour buses. We want to get to a lot with you here, but figure no better place to start than with a man with a very famous tour bus himself in Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys. We got the news last night during Monday Night Football that not only would Mike McCarthy not be coming back with the Dallas Cowboys head coach, and reading the tea leaves on this one, since Jerry Jones loves to read leaves, it sounds like Mike McCarthy may have had a lot of agency in this decision to walk away, knowing the process around Jerry Jones was always something that's going to put, whether it's the player or the coach, in a bad position and usually not be fair to them. And so he decided, as much as Jerry, to say, hey, all right, I'm not going to put up with this anymore and I'm going to go elsewhere. But then we get the reports that Deion Sanders and Jerry Jones have now talked. How much are you buying into that as a realistic option, Fitz? And do you agree with Troy Aikman that this is not the desirable job that it's going to be painted out to be?
Okay, so the Cowboys to Deion, on a scale of 0 to 100, I give it a 1. All right, there's very little chance in my mind that this makes any sense for anybody. This is a logical step where two people that know each other are having a conversation, and it's great for publicity for everybody involved. But think about a few things here. Number one, Deion has made it clear that if he leaves, he wants to be able to coach his son. I think it's complicated to look at any trade involving Dak Prescott not being your quarterback, $103 million cap hit, or $42 million this year and $25 the year after if they do a trade post June 1st. So that's a lot of dead money for anybody to take on. That's issue number one. Issue number two, and you guys know this, think about how Deion built Colorado. I think this is the under talked about portion of all of this. The first thing he did is went in the building and said, if you don't want to be here, get out. And he turned the entire roster over. And he did that 2 years in a row where you don't want to be here, get out. How does that work in the NFL where there's salary caps involved? It doesn't. You can't just walk into a locker room and say, hey, pack your bags. Here's your suitcase. You don't want to be part of this. Like, you can't just turn a roster over in your image in the NFL in a day. And that's what Deion had the opportunity to do at Colorado. Every time something doesn't work out at Colorado, they could just get rid of a player and bring somebody else in. It's a lot tougher to do that in the NFL, especially under the constraints of the contracts that Jerry has signed. So I don't think that there's any chance, any way, anyhow, that Deion ends up being the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. I think this is just a fun conversation for everybody involved. That being said, how appealing is the job? You still have superstars. I don't understand everyone that says this isn't an appealing job, because 2 years ago, Dak was an MVP finalist, right? We've seen really good from Dak. And on top of that, you got Micah, you got CD. I know that there's a lot that needs to be built. Jerry's a problem, blah, 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 blah. This is a team that won 12 games in a row, 12 games 3 years in a row. Like this, you can have success here with all of this. So I think it's a very appealing job. I just think we have to understand that it's one of those franchises that's pretty good and not great. And that's more appealing than going to the Raiders, who have had 15 coaches in the last 31 years when they make their next hire. So tell me about unappealing. I'm wearing the hoodie.
I think it's appealing. I think, Mike, it's appealing because of the other openings involved. You have the Jets that are open, no quarterback. You have New Orleans open. Is Derek Carr going to be the guy? He's not the future guy. You have Chicago open. You do have a quarterback. Jacksonville, you have a quarterback. Las Vegas, you do not have a quarterback. And Dallas, you definitely have a quarterback. So from that side of it, Mike, I can see why it would be appealing. Ownership, different story. Jerry hasn't really built a great team as of late. A regular season team he's built well, but unfortunately it hasn't gone well in the playoffs. But from the necessary tools of a quarterback, Dallas has that.
They do. And to Fitz's point, and I think I saw Dave Hellman make this point as well yesterday, the only other jobs that on a base level are as appealing are ones where you have great rookie signal callers, guys on rookie deals that you can mold, like Caleb Williams, like Drake May, where Mike Vrabel is now going to coach him. And that was a certain part of the appeal there. But Fitz is right. You've got so many of the pillars that franchises spend years trying to find already locked in on your roster. Now, you're going to have to go back through and continue to figure out the offensive line. Tyler Smith seems like a hit. Tyler Guyton, maybe less so this season, and you're still going to have to work on that. But you've got some exciting young pieces there. Really, the math in Dallas is just, can you deal with all of the other stuff? We saw the article that came out during the season about players mentioning the tours and everything else that's not about football around that building that you have to contend with while you're trying to build a football team. And so does that eliminate a certain portion of the pool that, quite honestly, and Fitz, we talked about this earlier, has already been at least somewhat hindered in their pursuit of them by the timing of this by the Dallas Cowboys? That's what makes all this stuff with Deion so interesting, to your point, is this just a clever diversion to cover up the conversation that would have been probably the more dominant one about this team missing their window to interview some of the better candidates that were out there right now because they decided to extend this dance with Mike McCarthy, which that's the most maddening part to me of all this, Fitz, is forget just denying on face value Mike McCarthy the opportunity to interview with teams during that exclusive negotiating week here. The fact that there was such a delta between the two sides and you still had so much to figure out with a guy that's been in your building for 5 years and that you could have been having versions of this conversation with, that you had to take it down to the zero barrier this last week, just reeks of the same negotiation tactics that have cost Jerry Jones time, money, and the kind of coherent roster construction that makes a champion.
Great point, Mike. What did you need to know in the last 8 days that you didn't know when the season ended? That's part of it. To me, season ends, you knew the result was coming. It's not like this was a heartbreaking playoff loss and you needed to take 2 or 3 days to sort of control your emotions. The Cowboys knew that their season was over. So they had weeks to prepare for whatever they decided they were going to do. And you can't tell me that McCarthy and Jerry Jones don't talk constantly. So what happened after the season that really changed any of it? There's one more important thing I think we need to factor into this, whatever's next for coaches and the Deion conversation. I will go to Jory Epstein that works for Yahoo Sports. She's part of Inside Coverage. She knows this organization incredibly well. And Shireen Williams, who we all know has covered the Cowboys for a very long time. There are two people that are wildly smart when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys, and they both echoed the same sentiment over the last 24 hours that we need to listen to. The fact is, Jerry Jones isn't going to pay a buyout. Whether we think he should or not, he's not going to pay a buyout. There's an $8 million buyout for Deion. When you ask, well, what about Bill Belichick? There's a $10 million buyout. Jerry doesn't like to spend money on coaches that he thinks is stupid spending. He's not going to spend for the buyout. So we're just basically, we're totally over here suspending any real logic around the Cowboys to have a fun conversation. And I think you're right. Part of this is, well, now you can placate the fan base, say, hey, we talked to Deion. Oh, that's got everybody excited. Deion's coming home, while you're actually talking to whoever's actually going to turn around and get the job. Plus, if it turns out that you interviewed Deion, let's be honest about it. Now, we saw the Patriots make a complete sham of the Rooney Rule. What better way to get through whatever they're going to do? If you're going to go through the Rooney Rule process, going through it with Deion gets you a lot more street cred than bringing in somebody that hasn't even coached in the NFL or been around the league for the last 2 years, which is what the Patriots did.
I do wonder, Dad, if he can fool the locals around there with this, because to Fitz's point, it sounds nice to sell to everyone. Look, we're looking at Deion Sanders. When, remember, the first couple of names that you heard bantered around once it was clear Mike McCarthy wasn't coming back was Jason Witten and Kellen Moore. Like, tell me, like, the fan base, I think, is much smarter majority that have been dealing with Jerry Jones and this Dallas Cowboys song and dance for a while. So I do wonder if you can fool the locals or if this is just going to be for the tourists.
Yeah, I don't think you can fool the locals anymore. It's been too long. And again, looking for their 9th coach since he bought the team. And speaking of looking for a coach, of the 6 teams still looking for a coach, only 2 had the trifecta. They're looking for a GM, a coach, and a quarterback. That's the Jets and your Las Vegas Raiders. What kind of coach are you trying to get in Las Vegas?
Well, look, it's an actual number. Credit to Charles Robinson that pointed this out to me the other day. When the Raiders make their next head coaching hire, it will be their 15th head coaching hire, not including interims, their 15th head coach in 31 years. So when it actually sticks like that. Who am I looking for? Hell, anybody. I figured this would be a trash heap hire. I didn't figure anybody would want the job. The fact that, according to credible people that I've talked to, that Ben Johnson is truly interested in this job is one of the biggest home runs I can imagine. If Ben Johnson takes the Raiders job, I will be stunned. I might actually throw a confetti parade in my house and a little party, because at this point, sure, we don't know. Ben Johnson may or may not be a very good head coach, but we know at this point he's a wildly respected coordinator. So, when you look at the crapshoot that is, I think we have to acknowledge that hiring a coach is a lot like drafting a quarterback. Every single year, every single time you do it, it might work out, right? So I don't feel great about it. I do, though, guys, feel really strongly that every team, and look, I'm looking straight at you, Tennessee Titans. I think when your team stinks, the only way that you change the culture is to rip everything down to the studs. I don't think you can hamstring a coach with the GM or hamstring a GM with the coach. You need to go from day one, bringing everybody in to have accountability top to bottom to everybody that's in the building. And frankly, if you're a team that needs a GM, a coach, and a quarterback, you need to have a plan from ownership all the way down, every single step of the way, on how you're going to address that and what the realistic expectation for the timeline is. You can't do that if you're keeping some people that are coaching or GMing for their job. Everybody has to start at ground zero at the same time from square one. So I actually credit, even though the Raiders did it a messy way, I credit them for doing the right thing, which is ripping the whole thing apart. I credit the Jets for doing the same thing. And I'm looking over at the Titans saying, why the heck didn't you do the same thing? Because I don't think you can be effective keeping one or the other.
Yeah, again, the Tennessee Titans, who last time around forsake their head coach in Mike Vrabel because it felt like there wasn't a collaborative effort with Ran Carthon, who they had brought over as the general manager, now go the other route here with their new head coach in Brian Callahan, and then sending Ran Carthon to the scrap heap here. So you're right, it is a bit of a mess in Tennessee right now, and with where they were at going all in on that roster, the quarterback decision around Will Levis that they're now going to have going into this offseason here, there is nothing that feels coherent or structured in Tennessee. And for a lot of these organizations that we've talked about, I feel like we did this with the Chicago Bears most recently, where we started to kind of look under the hood and go, oh, you guys really aren't all that well run when you look from the top down, starting with the McCaskies there. I think certainly the Tennessee Titans now also falling into that tax bracket of a team that clearly looks lost in terms of how they're going to try and build this going forward. And that's certainly not going to be made any easier by the fact that now, in the same side of football in the AFC, they're going to have to watch their old head coach in Mike Vrabel heading on over to New England and getting ready to coach that team.
Real quick, Mike, I would say let's just be honest here. Titans ownership stinks. Raiders ownership stinks. Jets ownership stinks. Browns ownership stinks. Like, go look at the bad teams. There's a common thread to what makes a bad team bad, and it's an owner that stinks.
All right, well, coming up next, I want to talk about how we make some bad teams better and one great organization that got a great head coach and what we think the fit's like. That's coming up next here on GoJo and Golic. All right, Jason Fitz back with us for another segment here on GoJo and Golic. And Fitz, we were talking a little bit about him, but I wanted to ask you more directly, as you were someone that did local radio in Nashville for a while, obviously lived there for a long time, so familiar with the Tennessee Titans when they were under the banner of Mike Vrabel, who's now the New England Patriots head coach. What you think that fit's going to be like, and what he brings as a head coach that might be able to stabilize a situation in New England? It's got a great quarterback, but definitely has fallen from the standard that we knew existed for so many years among Belichick and Brady.
Vrabel is an interesting dude, and I don't mean interesting in a weird way. You know, not like, oh yeah, interesting. Vrabel is the sort of person that players gravitate towards, but it's a certain type of player. So I think what you have to understand, and look, even common friends that we have mentioned this a million times. Like, you have to be thick-skinned to be around Mike Vrabel as a friend, as a coworker, as a whatever. You have to be ready for total accountability in absolutely everything that you do every single day. And he's the type of person that if he walks in and doesn't like the lunch, he's going to tell you loudly he doesn't like the lunch. Like, the standard is the standard, the Tomlinism that you guys have referenced so many times. That's very true to Mike Vrabel too. So I think this is exactly what New England needs in some ways, because you almost look, you're not going to go from Belichick to anybody. It's the same thing we talk about with Alabama. You're not going to replace Saban. So they have a year of Gerard Mayo. I think we can all agree that it was questionable the way that all went down and getting rid of Mayo at that point. But what you have now is somebody that doesn't feel any pressure to replace Belichick, doesn't feel any pressure to be anybody else's man. He's a very confident human being, and this is who I am, and this is how we will do things. I think that's the only way you can do things when you are replacing an era. So I think this is going to be really successful. I think Vrabel and Drake May together give you a real chance to compete if they can continue to develop him. And the one thing that, we've heard loudly about Vrabel, he did a great job of picking offensive coordinators at Tennessee. He's going to have to do the same thing here to bring in the right person for Drake May to get the most out of Drake as a quarterback. If he does that, I think New England's got their guy that's going to make him very good for the next decade.
Yeah, I think your point is well served. He's got an identity already. This is not someone that's going to be trying to find themselves in a place where we've watched so many former Bill Belichick assistants try and cosplay Bill Belichick somewhere else and not be able to make that imitation live up to reality. There's no trying to be someone else here. Mike Vrabel is going to be himself. That is cut from that cloth and similar enough, but I think enough of a change of pace and a blending of those two worlds that could be very, very successful here given the circumstances. So that is how the New England Patriots are going to try and march forward. Jesse, we want to take a look at a couple of these playoff teams that are now getting ready to go home after Wildcard weekend and try and figure out what their path forward is.
Yeah, let's talk about some of these teams in the AFC. So two AFC West teams. We got the Broncos and Chargers. First-year head coach in LA, rookie QB in Denver. What's the diagnosis for these teams moving forward, fellas?
Yeah, I want to start with the Chargers, Dad. Justin Herbert now 2 disastrous postseason performances here, only one with Jim Harbaugh. It's still a small sample size here, but how much confidence do you have that he can be the quarterback that ultimately gets the Chargers over the Kansas City-sized hump in that division with this administration? Do they actually have this tool in their bag?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think they got rid of all their offensive weapons, and we that's why I didn't think they would make the playoffs. But the defense played better, and Lad McConkey showed up for the Chargers, who was unbelievable. So they need more weapons on the offensive side. So you look at the draft. I mean, I don't know what wide receiver is going to be available, but how about a Jim Harbaugh guy, Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State, to start to help that offense. That's what they need. They need firepower on offense. I certainly Herbert is going to still have his chance there without question. But you need to upgrade the offensive weapons for him.
I think that's a fair point. And by the way, the Chargers were ahead of schedule. We all knew that this year. I think Harbaugh did a great job. I say this all the time. I want the best coaches to be like chopped on food TV. They open the basket of ingredients and they cook with whatever they have. I think Harbaugh did a great job with that offense this year. Weapons anywhere on the offensive side are going to be available for them in the first and second round. And they had a good draft last year. I think they can pile on top of that. As for Herbert, this is going to be kind of a prove it year. I mean, he decides at this point, he will prove to the world whether he's in the category of the Derek Carrs of the world, the guys that can beat you sometimes, but lose sometimes, or if he's in that upper echelon tier that we thought he was going to be in. Clearly right now, Justin Herbert has shown he does not belong in the conversation with the Josh Allens, the Lamar Jacksons, and the Patrick Mahomes. it hasn't happened that way. So I think there is a little bit of a pressure on him to maximize that, make the most of it. But second year under Harbaugh, the Chargers were so far here ahead of where I thought they'd be. I feel like the Chargers are a legitimate threat to the Chiefs if they have a good offseason.
So I think you're right. Justin Herbert has always been a talent on par with them, but right now the production has yet to match that in a meaningful way, at least when it comes to the games that matter most here. The thing that concerns me for this team, even when they get weapons, is we have seen the Greg Roman experience and how it ages already, even with great quarterbacks. And I do wonder if, with Greg Roman at the helm offensively, is this a team that ceiling tracks more Pittsburgh Steelers? Because we knew Jim Harbaugh can come in and raise a floor. Him and Mike Tomlin know how to coach. They know where they want everything. They know how they want it done. But that high-end result that right now they are chasing in a tough division for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think could be some of the same stuff here. I'm very curious to see what that looks like, because there were plenty of games this year where it started off with a bunch of the creative stuff here and they were able to scheme a bunch of great stuff for Justin Herbert. And then as the game wears on, you see a lot of the same things and the lack of imagination in the passing game that ultimately got Greg Roman shown the door in Baltimore. And so that's my only concern with that team, Dad, in terms of the way that this evolves, even if they stack other guys around Ladd in that wide receiver room.
Yeah, I mean, which is not the case, I think, for the Denver Broncos, where you have Sean Payton obviously running the offense. And I look for the same thing from the Denver Broncos. They had an excellent defense, but I think offensively, Cortland Sutton led the way with, 81 receptions. Next closest was a running back, Javonte Williams, with 52. They need help at wide receiver as well. And in an offense that's run by Sean Payton, the defense was excellent this year, especially sacking the quarterback. They were number one in the league. So I think, much like the Chargers, Jason, I think the Broncos need to add firepower to the Sean Payton offense.
Yeah, and if I'm the Broncos, I'm looking to try and add firepower in free agency if I can. You got a young quarterback that, I didn't expect Bo Nix to be as good as he was this year, but Bo, especially by the end of the year, looked really good, much better than most of us expected. But this is one of those opportunities where you can bring in some veteran guys that maybe you can put around him that can pick up the Sean Payton offense quicker, GoJo, and then give you a chance to quickly compete. There's a lot of youth in the wide receiver room, particularly around the league. We can turn around and just say every year, let's go get a rookie because we can get great production out of it. In this particular instance, I got a young quarterback. I would love to bring in veteran receivers, veteran weapons that can help him, that can come into that offense quicker and make an impact.
Yeah, I would agree on that, Fitz. I think that's a good way to go because you're right. You're trying to maximize a window now. Bo Nix, and you talk to people around that building, they're all bought in on him. Everyone is like, this dude is special. He's got the juice. And so I think now that you've got that, we see organizations all the time. The charge becomes, all right, how quickly can you put everything around them and try and strike while the iron's hot? Because paying a quarterback we know isn't prohibitive, but it certainly changes the way that you can team build. And so there is an opportunity for you to go out there and spend in that way here and continue to bolster the defense as well. That was a unit that towards the back half of the season, I don't think was quite as potent as it was there. Continuing to try and make sure that the spots opposite Pat Surtain II in a group that wants to play as much man coverage is certainly locked down, is going to be important. But that is going to be the next step. And I'll be curious from that standpoint too for Sean Payton, how much more he continues to put on Bo Nix. Remember, while he gets the comps, it's not yet Drew Brees. Drew Brees, you sat back, they ran 23 paint, he pointed out where he wanted himself protected, and then they let him go to work in distributing the football. That is not yet this offense, and how quickly they start to mold into more of that, I think, is going to be based on the aptitude Bo Nix displays behind the scenes, which he's shown you time and time again before in all these different offenses in college. He's certainly capable of, but that's going to be the challenge for them this offseason. Jesse, let's look at the other side in the NFC at some teams that also have some work to do.
Yeah, so Packers were, just really banged up at the wrong time. Bucs were the favorites in their game, but Commanders were 2 games better during the regular season. Tampa doing it with an explosive offense at times. Not the best 3 seed we've ever seen. How difficult is it going to be, do you guys think, for these 2 teams to be getting back in a difficult North and like a real topsy-turvy South?
So, Fitz, I actually think the Packers' way forward is pretty straightforward. It's just get healthy. This team, at the end of this game, it was sad. You wanted that game to be over quickly as Elton Jenkins went down. All 3 of their top receivers are out of this game. It was just a mash unit. Christian Watson was out before they even got to that game. I came out of this season with them more impressed with Matt LaFleur than maybe I'd ever been based on the work he did with Malik Willis earlier in the season. And I think by the end of the year, you saw Jeff Hafley's defense playing the more aggressive brand of football that you wanted to see from this group. They challenged Philadelphia up front physically on the defensive side of the football in a way that I was not ready for going into this game. And so I think for them, it's just as simple as get healthy and count on the fact that you've at the core of this got the right quarterback and play caller, and I think now the right coordinator on defense as well.
Yeah, I think part of this, we have Herculean expectations of quarterbacks all the time. So coming into this, because of Jordan Love's one big playoff game last year, it was, well, Jordan Love's just going to do the same. At some point, we have to be reasonable with what we expect Jordan Love to do with the weapons around him. Health would help Jordan Love in his development too. I would remind everybody that while Jordan Love's been in the league for a minute, we're talking about 2 seasons as a starter, right? And we've seen some good and bad over the course of those 2 seasons. We've seen some push there where like sometimes he's aggressive with the ball and there's just nobody there to take advantage of it. I can't figure out if that's a Jordan Love statement or if that's just a statement on the weapons. I think at some point continuity just matters, and the lack of continuity coming into this playoff game put them behind the 8-ball senior from the get-go to me.
Yeah, it did. I go to injuries here because while they don't really have a true number one, I like Reed, Kraft, Watson, Dobbs, Wicks, Jacobs coming out of the backfield, the running game with Jacobs. I like what they have on offense and defense. This team had 17 interceptions, 14 fumble recoveries, 31 takeaways, 45 sacks. I agree, Mike, as Hafley defense had come along, injuries hurt them. Without question. And they're also in a tough division. We can't say the same thing about Tampa Bay. Division. They're not in a tough division, right? They're in a very winnable division, as they have shown. Their offense, line, running backs with Bucky Irvin and what he did as a rookie, Rashad White to complement him, and Michael Evans still on the outside of Mike Evans, what he's doing. How long he can do it, I don't know, but it's been incredible. It's their defensive side of the ball that's been a little iffy for them, but they're definitely in an easier division.
They are, but I feel like walking into next year, the seat under Todd Bowles has got to be pretty hot based on all of the game management things that we've seen become a hallmark there. And to that point, Dad, them not being able to capitalize, I guess, more, although, with some of the defensive deficiencies in this roster, you wonder what the ceiling could really look like. They've been a playoff team each of the last couple of seasons, but I do think that team, it's going to be interesting. One, can Baker continue this output here? Follows up his best season as a pro with one with even higher levels of production offensively. Bucky Irving and this offensive line are the reason I have the most hope going forward, quite honestly, that the offensive foundation can continue. It's just going to be, can you retain Liam Cohen, who has now become one of those offensive names that's going to get hired as a head coach at some point? I told this story, but years ago got to cover them at Kentucky, and he was one of those coaches. I had this happen with Marcus Freeman when I covered him at Cincinnati, and then with Liam Cohen when I covered him at Kentucky, where we walked out of that coaches meeting with the coordinators and said, oh, this guy's going to be a head coach at some point. I don't know when it's going to be. It's going to be sooner than later, though, and he's going to do really well because the mental makeup seems to be there in addition to the aptitude. Fitz, it's going to be, can they keep him there, and then can they go back and supplement personnel-wise a defense that, hey, listen, got some guys like Kalijah Kancey, Yaya Diaby, really talented young guys to go along with older guys like Levante David in that back end, but they're going to have to supplement some stuff on that side of the football. And Todd Bowles is going to have to show that he can do a better job managing portions of the game than he has in recent memory.
Yeah, I think Todd Bowles needs to get some different people in his ear during the games. He needs some help in that situation. And you mentioned the defense. We expected that would be better addressed last offseason. Like, the Buccaneers need to decide what they want to be. If they want to just win the NFC South every year, cool. Just keep running it back. You're going to do that. It's a trash division. If you want to be competitive with the Lions, there's just, you need an influx of talent on that side of the ball. And real quick, I'll say on Liam Cohen, I will never forget, we talked to him when I was doing radio at ESPN at the time, before Will Levis was drafted, and talked to him and then talked to him after the interview we did. Probably had a half an hour conversation. His plan for development for Will Levis was absolutely beautiful. And the fact that the Titans never did that is part of the reason that I don't think Will Levis is very good. I would trust Liam Cohen developing a young quarterback right now. He's going to get a head coaching job, and I think he's going to crush it somewhere.
There is no doubt about that. Check out Jason Fitz over at Yahoo Sports, inside coverage, the college football power hour. Fitzy, always a pleasure, man. We appreciate the time.
Don't eat any beignets. They're trash. All right, go eat something better.
Oh, stop it.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Guys, GoJo is in New Orleans right now to eat his way down Bourbon Street, sponsored by Tums. You'll see all of that incredible content next week, or not next week, during Super Bowl week. So make sure that you tune in during Super Bowl week to see all that. I'm sure there'll be some disgusting stuff. Right now, we're going to do what we do best, okay? We're going to talk food. Over on DraftKings, Tums has a food popularity pool up there. So last week for the Wildcard games, the people decided on the most popular tailgate food. Without further ado, we have the winners in each category. So here's what we have. Whenever heartburn strikes, get fast relief with Tums. It's time to love food back again. So guys, did the people get it right? We have the winners: cola, chips, buffalo chicken dip, mac and cheese, chocolate chip cookies, and wings. Any surprises here? What are your initial thoughts when you see this?
My initial thoughts are drinks, it should be noted, do not include alcoholic beverages, because that's the number one thing I think of when it comes to a tailgate here. I do appreciate us going generic on this. I think number 3 on the drinks list was electrolyte drink, which is important at the tailgate if you've also got the alcoholic beverages mixed in there. But Dad, in general, this passed the smell test. For me, the top pick on this, and the one that made the most sense and that I was most spiritually aligned with, was the dips, the buffalo chicken dip. In my mind, a sporting event, a watch party is not complete without a molten hot buffalo chicken dip that, if you tap in too early, will ruin your entire day by burning your mouth in ways that you'll never recover from.
I am a monster buffalo chicken dip guy. Monster. So I absolutely like that as number 1. And I think it goes along with chips being number 1 because you can dip the chips, whether they're nacho chips or regular chips, into the buffalo chicken dip. So I think those work well together. And even when the buffalo chicken dip starts to get just warm, because that's the one thing you have to worry about at a tailgate, is food that's supposed to be hot not staying hot, you know, as the day goes on, as the tailgate goes on. So I think you have to have that in mind. And buffalo chicken dip, even when it's lukewarm to just warm, I think is still fine. Quite honestly, I'll eat it cold. I don't care. I dig it, Jesse.
Is there blue cheese in buffalo chicken dip?
I'm sure you can put it in there, but generally it is not something that I think is like called for in the recipe, but wouldn't mind it per se. Like, I know there's the debate about ranch and blue cheese in general when it comes to, you know, something like wings that also made its way into the platter somewhere here as the main dish. They were the number 1 main dish, which at a tailgate, again, to Dad's point, something that's easily snackable, something that renders pretty well as it gets cold. For ranch and blue cheese, I prefer ranch, but both of them are viable. Like, if blue cheese is the only thing on the table, I'm going to dip it in there and get those wings a little saucy.
No, I'm out if there's blue cheese. So out. Far away from
Oh,
that.
wow, not a blue cheese fan. Well, normally there's a choice of ranch or blue cheese. A good tailgate is going to have a choice for you. It's not just going to have one. Quite honestly, I'm out as wings as number 1. I think it's cheeseburger sliders. And I like the fact that it's sliders, because there's so many different things to eat at a tailgate that if you have a regular sized cheeseburger, that would tend to fill you up more, as opposed to grabbing a slider. So you have room for the chips and the buffalo chicken dip, for obviously the dessert, of which I would pick all of these desserts. But the chocolate chip cookie is definitely the easiest. The sides, I like mac and cheese. I like a potato salad as well. Again, a potato salad, it can be lukewarm or a little cold. A mac and cheese normally starts out hot, and then it can cool off depending on how long it sits.
I think fries should have been number 1 there. That's an infinitely better tailgate food than mac and cheese that's just sitting out there all the time. I think, again, what this list seems to value in addition to taste is portability. It's things that you can pick up pretty easily, have a little bit of, but have a lot in totality. And I think French fries fit the billing for that a lot more than mac and cheese. That, listen, if we're talking Thanksgiving plates, I've drafted mac and cheese as the number 1 side in plenty of those pools. But if we're talking tailgate food here, I do think French fries has to win out for the portability.
I'm not going to lie, Mike. I have never seen French fries at a tailgate.
Yeah, that's
Who
what
makes
I was gonna
French
say.
fries?
Yeah, I was going to say, I
I've
want
never
them.
seen. Yeah, I mean, I like them. The portability is great. I understand everything you said, but I'm not going to lie. I don't think I have ever seen French fries at a tailgate. Nobody is cutting up potatoes and making French fries. At least I have not seen that. So
I'm saying you like buy them from somewhere else. I don't think you have to you're not going farm to table on the French fries here. Just like you're not going farm to table on a slider. You're not forming the burgers and mashing them there. You're probably getting them from somewhere else. You're probably getting little sliders that you bought from somewhere.
But you're slapping them on the grill, aren't you?
No, but you're cooking the sliders on the grill. I mean, you're grilling them right there. And I'm out on fries because
you baking the mac and cheese out there in the parking lot here? Like you could prepare things at home.
That's fair. That's fair.
So here's the thing. With mac and cheese, I can eat warm and I can eat cold. Fries, I don't like cold. If you're sitting around, they're sitting around.
Fries are much better cold than mac and cheese. That's an absurd take.
If you dip the fries in barbecue sauce, you can eat them no matter their temperature.
That's true. I'll tell you. Yeah, that's true. One of the sides that I really like that is not really manageable, though, with a slider is baked beans. I love baked beans, but that's another one that's tough if it's sitting out for a while. I actually like mixing a little mustard in the baked beans. Oh, man. I mean, that gets my mouth going.
What we're missing here, too, is that, because it wasn't an option, is that I think a lot of this depends on how many beers you've had. Because this, it's like what you might be, we're rating right now, but what I'm actually eating at a tailgate after I've had 2 beers, I mean, it's anything. It's honestly anything.
Yeah. Oh, well, after 2 beers is when the combo platter starts. Like to Dad's point, you start mixing and matching things. You're so preoccupied, you're starting to think about what could be, not just what is on your plate. So I do think that's the underlying factor here. And that's why Tums is helpful for all of this, because everything we've mentioned, in addition to making me drool a ton, has also given me preemptive heartburn. So shout out to the folks at Tums for getting that right.
By the way, shout out to Tums, because it's the treat of pregnant ladies everywhere, because in your 3rd trimester, you are just a fire-breathing dragon, and my reflux was so unbearable. I was snacking on those Tums day and night. So thank you, Tums. We appreciate it. Pregnant ladies too.
What I have found out is that apparently I am a 3rd trimester pregnant woman just in my daily life based on the amount of heartburn that I live with. So that's a cool thing that we have in common, pregnant ladies.
That's great.
I don't think we've given enough talk to the desserts. We just kind of said chocolate chip cookies, which is the easiest. But, man, I would take – now, the ice cream sandwich you have to have in a cooler, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you have to keep that obviously cold or next to frozen. But chocolate chip cookies, cheesecake bites, brownie, chocolate cake, cupcake, I'll take all those, all of them.
Cheesecake bites had me feeling some type of way. I mean, wow.
Cheesecake bites, honestly, too high on the list for me here. Like, call me old-fashioned, but to your point about things that we actually see out in the wild, how often are you seeing cheesecake bites at a tailgate versus those cupcakes that you get from the grocery store that come in that plastic pack? Those are at every tailgate I've ever been to. Yep. They're usually the minis there, and they're great because, again, I'm trying to pop on the go. I'm wheeling and dealing. We might be playing bags out there, might be tossing the ball around a little bit. All these things that come up that are a lot easier to do when you've got one cupcake. And to Jesse's point, when my big fat ass starts to get a couple of drinks in me here, that's all of a sudden where a couple of cookies pop out. You take a cupcake and jam it in the middle there. Now you got a sandwich, because the hallmark of being a fat kid is seeing sandwiches where most other people just see individual items of food that wouldn't normally go together. So it's beautiful. Yep. I'm starving now, and thank God that Tums has sent me down here to New Orleans to go and satisfy my hunger here in the coming days.
Yeah, I definitely think the categories that are hit the most are the snacks, the dip, and the sides. Mm-hmm. I think those are the 3 things, and obviously the desserts. But I think those 3 are the main things that are hit mostly.
I agree with that, yeah. And then you get something sweet, and then you got to go back to savory, and then you just ping pong for the rest of the tailgate. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's been hit the most here is the drool button for all of us, as I've heard everyone individually have to catch their breath and stop the saliva from leaking out of their mouths here. So go and continue to vote on this incredible polling opportunity as the postseason goes along. Coming up next, we'll talk about a little bit of brotherly love amongst postseason division competitors next. All right, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of the day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review our show. Leave it a 5-star rating and watch us live here Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well over on YouTube. GoJo and Golic, a one-stop shop for everything we got going on with the show, especially, as Jesse pointed out, we are just a couple weeks out from the Super Bowl. We're going to have tons of content coming your way from that, and so make sure that you are subscribed. You hit the little bell so you know when we're ready to go, because we got plenty of stuff coming your way. Thank you to our friends who joined us today on the show. Marty Smith, ESPN college football reporter and going to be part of the broadcast for TGL on ESPN as Tiger Woods gets set to tee off there tonight. And our buddy Jason Fitz from Yahoo Sports, who spent a half hour with us in hour number 2, talking the NFL, Deion Sanders to the Cowboys, Mike Vrabel to New England, and more. If you missed either of those interviews, you can check them out wherever you get our podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. Guys, let's start off with this. We know the New York Giants season ended pretty early here, and so along with the Jacksonville Jaguars, which meant that a couple of guys had some free time to go watch one of their buddies here. We saw a couple of pictures and video of Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas Jr., both heading out to watch their former quarterback in Jaden Daniels notch his playoff win, and the first playoff win for the Washington Commanders since 2006. Dad, I'm sure Giants fans will react very normally to this, watching one of their star players go and support a division rival.
Well, that's why fan is short for fanatic. Who gives a damn? I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, again, the Brian Thomas Jr. is a rookie, and Malik Nabers is a rookie. These guys were just teammates not long ago with Jaden Daniels. So, I mean, there's still obviously the teammate and the camaraderie there. If a Giant fan cares about this, you got more issues than your team. I mean, come on. There is absolutely zero wrong with this in my book.
Quite honestly, if you're an LSU fan and you know, this year a bit of a disappointment relative to expectation for you on that front, at the very least, you can look and see your sweet Baton Rouge Tiger Sons all out here supporting each other in a way that's pretty awesome. Like, what a great thing to see. Those guys were part of such a special season for LSU last year that culminated in a Heisman Trophy that, while it only goes to Jaden Daniels, Dad, everyone who was a part of that team and especially a part of that offense, and we know Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Nabers were a huge part of that offense, gets to point to that award in that special season and feel some type of ownership about it. So the fact that these guys are still close enough to where they'd fly out and do this and get to hang out with each other, I think is awesome. Yeah. Love to see guys being friends and putting that on main here. More dude moment. This is, you know what this is? This is a textbook dudes rock moment right here. Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas Jr. This rocks, and so do you guys here. Very happy to see that for the guys going out there and supporting the guy who's probably going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, even if we could make an argument for a certain tight end out in Las Vegas as well. But Jesse, from ballers on the field to ballers off the court, let's get to that. What do we got here?
Yeah, big ballers only, please. Okay, so LaMelo is leading the Eastern Conference guards in all-star votes. Lonzo is a starter on the Bulls. And LiAngelo, guys, he now has a $13 million deal with Def Jam Records. I mean, apparently $8 million of this is guaranteed. Maybe LeVar Ball actually would have beaten Jordan one-on-one. I don't know. Everything he spewed seemed like absolute nonsense, but here he is. He's like on the Mount Rushmore of dads now. On him, they called him crazy, but look at what he's done, guys. I don't know. Jello has one song, and he's doing this. So you got to say there's LeVar's onto something.
Well, I think that there's no coincidence that when we stopped hearing from LeVar was when things started going very well for his kids all across their various professions. So if we're going to draw a correlation there, that might be one of it, that, hey, when you just let your very talented sons, who you do deserve credit for raising well and getting to this point, go out here and just operate as adults on their own without meddling in everything, things can go pretty well. It is amazing, though, Dad. This does seem to all be tied to his one-song tweakers that we've seen sweep locker rooms across sports. I didn't know this, Dad, and I know very little. We should have honestly asked this question to Jason Fitz when he was on here, as Jason spent his former life as a fiddle player in the band Perry and grew up around music, that we were doing guarantees in music deals like this was a signing bonus for a sports contract.
Never heard that. Again, you're right. We should have asked Jason. He would know the more info about that. But listen, these are three success. Now, LiAngelo was obviously trying to play basketball, went through the G League, and it just didn't work out. But boy, to go into your next career that quickly and get that much money guaranteed is pretty impressive. Listen, LaMelo is the ball player of the group. There's no doubt about it. Lonzo has gone through just injury after injury with his knee. It's a shame, not his fault. It's the injury. But you're right. The correlation of them taking off and LeVar taking a back seat, you wonder if it was his kid saying, hey, Dad, chill. All right. Enough of going on shows and being the barker and stuff and being the loudmouth. Let our talent take us there, which it did, by the way. It's a pretty impressive family. There's no doubt about it.
I don't know. I think LeVar's been taking some lessons from Kris Jenner. I don't know. I mean, the devil works hard, but these two work harder.
Apparently so here. Because was LiAngelo the one that got popped for like shoplifting or something when he was over in China and they had to like work to get him back into the country when he was at UCLA?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm not positive. I hate to say it's the wrong one.
Yes, it was
Jesse,
him.
I was going to say,
yes,
it was LiAngelo. And what was it for exactly? I don't want to put shoplifting
in China.
Oh, okay. All right. So I did have it exactly right there. You know what?
There you go.
What a success story to come back from that and now find his way to a point where he's got an incredibly popular song. Our producer Billy just said that he's going to be at Rolling Loud off. Again, I don't know what kind of longevity this has, but we've seen in a world where you're one now, at least for the time being, viral TikTok video away from a song popping in a way that may have taken radio play that would have been harder to come by before. That's all it really seems to take for people to want to take a chance on you here. And according to Shams, he is going to own all of his own music and his own record label in the process. So an industry that also has seemed pretty predatory for a long time with new artists apparently is giving Jello a fair amount of control. So good for him, man. I hope it works out. I've heard a little bit of the song. It sounds okay. I can't claim to be a massive Jello fan, but the wise man once said, get it how you live. And so he will do just that. And we will move on to the third, Jesse. What do we got?
Well, one of the reasons that we love minor league baseball is because of the mascots and uniforms and promotions. And we got another good one in Binghamton. Okay, the Rumble Ponies, a great name, going to play under the name Bathtub Donkeys with appropriate uniforms for a few games next season. Change your name, change everything. I don't know. I love it. Why not? Hey, Rumble Ponies, now you're the Bathtub Donkeys. Why not? There's no rules.
Well, apparently there was a rule put into place, Jesse, in the 1800s in Brooklyn. Someone apparently put into effect an American blue law stating that donkeys could not sleep in bathtubs. So that rule popped up as apparently a donkey once fell asleep in a bathtub floating down the river. So they had to pass that law, which is a hilarious scenario that I need to know more about the origins of. But shout out to the Rumble Ponies that at one time were the home of Tim Tebow when he was going through his baseball journey. I remember as someone that was a card carrying and still is fan of the Hartford Yard Goats, the best AA ballpark in America, about 4 years running, and the AA affiliate of the Colorado Rockies. Tim Tebow would come and make his visits and play at the Yard Goats Park, where the Yard Goats dad used to moonlight as, I believe, the praying mantises and the steamed cheeseburgers as an homage to one of the delicacies germane to Connecticut.
Listen, minor league baseball games are so much fun to go to the entertainment factor. When we were at ESPN and we would have our group from our radio show go to yard goat games, we would obviously drink maybe a little too much. And one of the promotions they had was baby races between innings. And the amount of money we pulled out of our pocket betting on which baby would win was in correlation to the amount of beer we were drinking was pretty absurd. But yeah, we were openly gambling on baby races.
Those are
God.
simpler times indeed here. Minor League Baseball, fantastic. This mascot, awesome. I just got reminded, too, that I'm down in New Orleans, a mere stone's throw from the AAA Marlins affiliate here, the New Orleans Baby Cakes, with one of the most horrifying and disturbing mascots in the history of sports at any level of professional sports. So shout out to the Bathtub Donkeys here. That gear is going to go crazy, and I'm sure they're going to move a ton of merch, which, as always, is the goal, getting people in the ticket gate and moving merch there. We're glad that you came and got in the gates here at GoJo and Golic. If you like it, download, subscribe, rate, review the show. Leave it a great rating. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.